Welcome back to the channel The Coin Empire. Today we are diving into one of the most shocking and unbelievable stories in the world of rare coin collecting, a story that sounds almost impossible but continues to excite collectors and treasure hunters across the globe. Because we are talking about a simple 1979 1-cent United States coin that some experts believe could reach an astonishing value of $80 million due to rare errors, minting mistakes, and extraordinary circumstances that transformed an ordinary penny into a legendary piece of numismatic history. And before you dismiss this as just another exaggerated claim, stay with me because the fascinating details behind the 1979 Lincoln cent might completely change the way you look at the loose change in your pocket. The 1979 1-cent coin features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a design that had been in circulation since 1959. Struck primarily at the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, and composed mostly of copper with a small percentage of zinc, yet within the millions and millions of coins produced that year there were a handful of extraordinary mint errors that created the possibility for extreme rarity. And in the world of coin collecting, rarity combined with condition and dramatic error can skyrocket values beyond imagination. One of the most talked about possibilities for a 1979 penny reaching such a jaw-dropping figure is the presence of a dramatic double die error, a situation where the working die received a misaligned impression during hubbing, causing the design to appear doubled, especially noticeable on the inscriptions like Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and the date 1979 itself. And while minor doubling can be somewhat common, a strong, bold, unmistakable doubled die with clear separation can become highly desirable, particularly if it escaped into circulation unnoticed and survived in near perfect condition. And then there's the possibility of an off-metal strike, one of the rarest and most valuable types of mint errors, where a coin is struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination or even a different year's composition. Imagine a 1979 Lincoln cent struck on a dime planchet or on a leftover experimental bronze alloy from previous years. Such a mismatch in weight and metallic composition would immediately attract attention from experts and collectors, and if verified and authenticated by major grading services, it could become a one-of-a-kind treasure commanding an astronomical price. Another incredible factor that could push a 1979 penny toward that $80 million mark would be a transitional error. And transitional errors occur when the mint changes metal composition or design elements, and a small number of coins are accidentally struck using outdated materials or dies. Although the major composition change for the Lincoln cent happened in 1982 when copper was replaced with zinc cores plated in copper, there is speculation among collectors that test strikes and leftover planchets from experimental batches could have been used in late 1979 production runs, and if a 1979 penny were discovered struck on an experimental or undocumented composition, it would represent an extraordinary historical anomaly. A unique piece of mint history that would captivate the numismatic community. And beyond metal composition and doubled dies, we must consider broad strikes, where the retaining collar fails and the coin expands beyond its normal diameter, creating a flattened rimless appearance, or a dramatic off-center strike where perhaps 40 or 50% of the design is missing yet the date remains visible. These types of errors can dramatically increase value, especially when they are severe yet aesthetically striking. Collectors are drawn to errors that tell a clear story of mechanical failure at the mint, and when that story is bold and undeniable, the value climbs. But perhaps one of the rarest and most sensational possibilities would be a mule error. A mule occurs when two dies that were never intended to be paired together are accidentally used to strike a coin. Imagine a 1979 Lincoln obverse paired with a reverse design from another denomination or an experimental reverse that was never officially released. Such a coin would be considered a major mint blunder, an extreme rarity that could become a headline-making auction centerpiece. And when you combine uniqueness, historical significance, and media attention, the sky becomes the limit in terms of valuation. Condition also plays a massive role, because even a rare error coin must survive in exceptional state to command millions. A 1979 penny graded mint state 70 by a reputable grading service like PCGS or NGC with blazing red luster, flawless surfaces. And a dramatic error would be considered nearly priceless among serious collectors. The Population Report showing perhaps only one known specimen would ignite bidding wars among wealthy numismatists, investors, and even museums. And we must also talk about die cracks and cuds, raised lines or blobs of metal that form when a die begins to fracture. While small cracks are common, a massive retained cud breaking through a significant portion of the design can create a visually stunning and highly collectible piece. And if paired with other errors like doubling or off-center striking, it would multiply. The coin's uniqueness. Another intriguing factor is the possibility of a wrong planchet error involving foreign coin blanks. During busy production periods, foreign planchets have occasionally mixed with domestic supplies, leading to coins struck on metal intended for other countries. If a 1979 Lincoln cent were struck on a foreign bronze or brass planchet with different weight and diameter specifications, it would represent a cross-border mint mishap of historic proportions. Authentication of such a piece would cause shockwaves in the collecting community. And then there is the rare but highly coveted phenomenon of a full blockage error, where a previously struck coin sticks to the die and impresses a mirrored incuse image onto the next blank planchet, creating a ghostly reverse design. A full blockage 1979 penny with sharp detail and full date visible would be breathtaking and extremely scarce. The uniqueness factor alone would send collectors scrambling, and when we consider the psychology of high-end auctions, we realize that value is not just about metal and error but about story, hype, rarity, and demand. If a 1979 penny with multiple dramatic mint errors were discovered in pristine condition and heavily publicized, wealthy collectors might view it as a once-in-a-lifetime acquisition, similar to how rare artwork commands tens of millions due to uniqueness and prestige. And another angle that fuels speculation is the possibility of a proof coin accidentally entering circulation or being struck with circulation dies but possessing proof-like qualities. Deep mirrored fields and frosted devices known as cameo contrast can elevate desirability, and if such a coin also exhibited a rare error, its value would climb exponentially. We also cannot ignore the role of historical documentation. If mint records revealed a short-lived experimental die trial or test strike batch in 1979 that was never meant to leave the facility, and a surviving specimen surfaced decades later, that documented backstory would dramatically increase confidence and bidding enthusiasm. Provenance matters greatly in high-value coins. If the coin could be traced back to a former mint employee or an estate collection discovered in untouched condition, collectors would see it not just as a coin but as a tangible piece of American minting history. And while $80 million sounds extreme, history has shown that when rarity meets intense collector passion and global publicity, valuations can defy expectations, especially in niche markets where a single unique item becomes the ultimate prize. And in addition to mechanical errors, we must consider dramatic die rotation errors where the reverse is rotated far beyond normal tolerances. A 180-degree rotated reverse combined with other anomalies could create an unforgettable specimen. Clipped planchet errors where a portion of the blank is missing due to improper cutting can also draw strong premiums, particularly when the clip is large and the coin shows the characteristic Blakesley effect near the rim opposite the clip. And when we stack multiple errors together on one coin, for example a double die obverse struck off-center on an off-metal planchet, with a die crack running through Lincoln's portrait, we move into territory where the coin may truly be one of one. And that is the phrase that sends collectors into a frenzy, because a one-of-one coin means there is no substitute, no alternative, no second chance. If you want it, you must outbid everyone else. And that is where valuations can escalate beyond rational expectations, especially if billionaires with a passion for rare collectibles decide to compete. And the 1979 date itself sits at an interesting point in history. The late 1970s were a time of economic shifts and inflation concerns in the United States. Coin production numbers were high, but quality control was not perfect, meaning opportunities for mistakes certainly existed. Yet, finding one preserved in top condition is like finding a needle in a haystack, which only adds to the mystique, and we also have to consider the grading market dynamics. Next, 1992 1-cent coin. Today we are diving into one of the most shocking and mysterious stories in modern American coin collecting, the unbelievable tale of a 1992 1-cent coin that some collectors believe could be worth as much as $77 million because of rare errors, unusual die varieties, and extraordinary minting mistakes that transformed an ordinary copper-plated zinc penny into a legendary treasure. And if you think a simple penny from your pocket could never change your life, wait until you hear the full story of how tiny differences in lettering, spacing, metal composition, and die preparation can send shockwaves through the numismatic world and turn a single cent into a multimillion-dollar dream, because the 1992 Lincoln cent struck at the Denver Mint has become one of the most talked about modern varieties due to the famous close AM reverse design. A subtle but incredibly important detail involving the spacing between the letters A and M in the word America on the reverse side of the coin, as most 1992 pennies were struck with a wide AM design intended for circulation that year, but a very small number were mistakenly struck using a reverse die meant for proof coins, which had the close AM spacing where the A and M nearly touch, creating a rare transitional error that was never supposed to enter circulation. And this small design mix-up alone has driven confirmed examples into the tens of thousands of dollars at auction, but when collectors begin to imagine a perfect storm of additional mint errors stacked onto this already rare variety, the theoretical value climbs into astonishing territory, because rarity in coin collecting is all about combinations, condition, and story, and the 1992 close AM penny already has the rarity and the story. But if one were discovered with dramatic doubling on the obverse, perhaps a strong double die showing separation in the date, the word liberty, and the motto I in God we trust, the desirability would increase exponentially, since double die errors are created during the hubbing process when the die receives multiple misaligned impressions from the hub, leaving distinct and visible doubling that cannot be replicated by post-mint damage, and when you combine a double die obverse with the close AM reverse, you suddenly have a dual-error coin that represents two separate production mistakes at different stages of the minting process. A statistical improbability that fuels collector excitement and competitive bidding wars. And imagine further if that same coin also displayed a repunched mint mark, where the D mint mark beneath the date was punched into the die more than once at slightly different angles, leaving visible traces of the earlier punch beneath the final impression, a feature that was common in earlier decades but increasingly rare by the early 1990s as minting technology improved, making a 1992 penny with a clear repunched mint mark and close AM reverse a unique bridge between old minting practices and modern production methods. And if that were not enough, consider the possibility of an off-center strike, perhaps 10 or 15% off-center while still retaining a full visible date and mint mark, which collectors love because it clearly demonstrates a striking misalignment, while preserving the coin's identity. And now imagine that off-center close AM 1992 descent also retained full red luster, graded mint state 69 red by a top grading service, nearly perfect in surface preservation with blazing original color, because condition is king in the coin market, and high-grade examples of rare varieties multiply in value dramatically compared to circulated pieces. And then add another layer of intrigue such as a wrong planchet error, where the coin was accidentally struck on a bronze planchet leftover from pre-1983 production instead of the standard copper-plated zinc core used in 1992, instantly altering its weight and metallic composition, creating a transitional composition error that would fascinate metallurgists and collectors alike. And suddenly the coin is not just a close AM variety but a multi-layered mint anomaly combining die variety, striking error, and planchet error in one extraordinary piece. And when collectors speak of values reaching tens of millions, they are often imagining such once-in-a-lifetime combinations that might never be duplicated, because a numismatic's provenance and uniqueness drive price beyond standard catalog listings. And if this hypothetical 1992 descent were discovered in an original bank-wrapped roll, traced back to an early 1990s Federal Reserve shipment, and documented thoroughly with photographic evidence and third-party authentication, its backstory would further elevate its desirability, since documented discovery stories often become part of numismatic lore. Much like famous rarities of the past that achieved legendary status not only because of rarity but because of the excitement surrounding their discovery. And when media coverage amplifies such a find, new collectors flood the market searching their own change, increasing demand and driving bidding competition higher and higher. And in today's digital age where auctions are global and wealthy collectors from around the world can participate instantly, the ceiling for a truly unique coin is limited only by the passion and resources of those competing for ownership, and the psychology of collecting plays a major role here, because owning the finest known example of a famous era like the 1992 D-Close AM gives a collector prestige, bragging rights, and a permanent place in numismatic history, especially if grading populations confirm that no other coin matches its exact combination of features. And population reports from grading services show extremely low numbers for the 1992 D-Close AM variety in high mint state grades, which already establishes its rarity baseline. But if a specimen emerged that exceeded all known examples in quality while also adding dramatic secondary errors such as a broad strike from collar failure, visible die cracks forming lightning-like patterns across the surface, or a retained cut where a chunk of the die broke away leaving a raised blob of metal along the rim, the uniqueness factor would soar beyond conventional price guides. And collectors would view it not just as a coin but as a minting time capsule capturing multiple moments of mechanical failure inside. The Denver Mint. And speaking of the Denver Mint, its long history of producing billions of coins each year means that even microscopic error rates can create a handful of spectacular anomalies that slip into circulation unnoticed. And because pennies are often overlooked and undervalued, many rare varieties remain undiscovered for years inside jars, drawers, and forgotten piggy banks, adding an element of treasure hunt excitement that keeps the hobby alive. And the 1992 D-Close AM penny in particular was not widely recognized until years after its release, meaning countless examples may have been spent without anyone realizing their significance, further reducing surviving populations and intensifying rarity. And when scarcity meets condition rarity, prices escalate rapidly, especially in headline-grabbing scenarios where media outlets report a penny worth millions, drawing attention from outside the traditional coin collecting community. And while $77 million represents a speculative upper extreme often discussed in sensational conversations, it reflects the idea that if a coin were proven to be one of a kind with multiple authenticated mint errors and impeccable preservation, wealthy investors might treat it as both a collectible and an alternative asset. Similar to how rare art pieces or historic manuscripts command astronomical prices due to their uniqueness and cultural narrative, and in the world of numismatics there have been instances where coins once considered ordinary later achieved legendary status after new research identified previously unnoticed varieties, so ongoing study of die markers, spacing anomalies, and transitional design elements continues to reshape our understanding of rarity, and researchers analyzing the 1992 D reverse dies have mapped subtle distinctions in the lettering alignment, the shape of the FG initials of designer Frank Gasparo near the Lincoln Memorial, and the positioning of the memorial columns, helping experts distinguish genuine close AM examples from altered coins where individuals attempt to push the letters together artificially, because authenticity is critical at high value levels, and advanced microscopy, metallurgical analysis, and digital imaging now play roles in verifying such rarities, adding scientific credibility that strengthens auction results. And consider also the potential for a dramatic die clash on a 1992 D-Close AM cent, where obverse and reverse dies struck each other, without a planchet in between, leaving ghostly mirrored design elements impressed into the dies and subsequently onto coins, creating eerie outlines of Lincoln's profile on the reverse or fragments of the memorial on the obverse, features that collectors find fascinating because they reveal the hidden mechanics of the minting process. And if such a die clash occurred on the rare Close AM reverse die before it was replaced, only a tiny run of coins would display that clash in combination with the spacing anomaly, further narrowing the field of surviving examples. Next, 1989 D 1-cent coin. Today we are uncovering one of the most fascinating and unbelievable stories in the world of coin collecting, the mysterious and potentially life-changing tale of the 1989 D 1-cent United States coin that some collectors believe could command an astonishing $75 million because of rare errors, minting mistakes, and extraordinary combinations of anomalies that transform an ordinary pocket penny into a legendary treasure. And before you dismiss the idea of a single cent being worth more than a mansion or a private jet, you need to understand how the smallest variations in design, metal composition, die preparation, and striking alignment can create extreme rarity. And in the world of numismatics, rarity combined with condition and historical intrigue can send values into the stratosphere. Because the 1989 D Lincoln cent struck at the Denver Mint was produced in the billions. Yet within those billions lies the possibility of a tiny handful of coins bearing mistakes so unusual and so statistically improbable that they stand apart from the rest of the mintage like hidden gems waiting to be discovered. And when we talk about the 1989 D penny reaching theoretical values of $75 million, we are not referring to an ordinary circulated example with scratches and wear. We are imagining the ultimate specimen. A coin that combines multiple authenticated mint errors in near perfect condition, creating a one-of-a-kind masterpiece of mechanical imperfection, and one of the most exciting possibilities for the 1989 D cent is the presence of a dramatic double die obverse, a variety created during the die manufacturing process when the hub impresses the design onto the die more than once at slightly different angles, leaving visible separation in the lettering and numbers, especially in the date 1989, the word liberty, and the motto I in God we trust. And true doubled dies are highly sought after because they originate from the die itself and therefore appear on every coin struck from that die, making them collectible varieties rather than post-mint damage. And if such a double die obverse were paired with a rare reverse anomaly, the desirability would multiply instantly. And speaking of reverse anomalies, the Lincoln cent series is famous for design transitions and subtle spacing differences that can create highly valuable varieties. And while 1989 is not widely known for a major reverse design change, the possibility of a transitional die being used accidentally, perhaps a proof reverse or an experimental hub intended for another year, would create an unprecedented rarity, especially if the spacing of the letters in America or the positioning of the designer initials FG near the Lincoln Memorial differed noticeably from standard circulation strikes. Because collectors carefully study these details, and when a deviation is discovered, it can ignite intense excitement. And beyond die varieties, there is the realm of striking errors, where coins are misaligned, off-center, broad-struck without the retaining collar, or even struck multiple times, creating ghost-like overlapping images. And imagine a 1989 D penny struck 20% off-center yet retaining a full visible date and mint mark, combined with a bold double die and pristine red luster, instantly making it unique among known survivors. And if that were not enough, consider the potential of a wrong planchet error, where the 1989 D cent was mistakenly struck on a bronze planchet left over from before the 1982 composition change rather than the copper-plated zinc planchet standard for the late 1980s, instantly altering its weight from approximately 2.5 grams to around 3.11 grams, a difference detectable by collectors with precision scales. And such transitional composition errors are extraordinarily rare because by 1989 the mint's production systems were firmly standardized, so the accidental use of an outdated metal blank would represent a significant oversight and an extremely collectible mistake. And now imagine that this same coin also displayed a repunched mint mark, where the D mint mark beneath the date was punched into the die more than once at slightly different positions, leaving traces of the earlier punch visible beneath the final letter, a feature that was becoming less common by the late 1980s as mint mark punching practices evolved, making its appearance on a 1989 D cent even more intriguing. And when multiple independent errors occur on the same coin, the statistical improbability increases dramatically, making that single specimen stand alone in the marketplace. And uniqueness is the ultimate driver of value because collectors competing for a one-of-a-kind piece often abandon traditional price guides and focus instead on prestige, historical importance, and long-term investment potential. And condition further amplifies this effect because a coin graded mint state 69 read by a respected third-party grading service, displaying full original mint luster without significant contact marks, is exponentially rarer than one found in circulation. And when such high-grade preservation intersects with multiple dramatic errors, the result can be a bidding war among elite collectors who recognize the opportunity to own a piece of numismatic history. And beyond doubling and composition errors, there is also the possibility of die clashes, which occur when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them. transferring faint elements of each design onto the opposing die, and subsequent coins struck from those clashed dies show ghostly outlines of Lincoln's profile on the reverse or fragments of the memorial columns on the obverse, adding another layer of fascination because die clashes provide a glimpse into the hidden mechanics of coin production. And if such a clash occurred on a doubled die 1989 descent, and only a small batch was struck before the die was replaced, the rarity would intensify even further, and collectors would meticulously catalog the die markers, including cracks, chips, and cuts that formed as the die deteriorated over time, because these markers authenticate the coin and establish its position within the die's lifespan, and a retained cud, where a portion of the die breaks away but remains partially attached, creating a raised blob of metal along the rim of the coin, would add visual drama and reinforce the narrative of a die pushed beyond its limits during high speed production at the Denver Mint. And speaking of the Denver Mint, its history of producing billions of coins annually means that even a minuscule error rate can result in a few spectacular anomalies slipping into circulation unnoticed. And because pennies are often ignored or stored casually in jars and drawers, rare pieces can remain hidden for decades, only to be rediscovered by sharp-eyed collectors years later. And this delayed discovery factor reduces surviving populations because many examples may have been lost to wear or damage before their significance was understood, and when population reports from grading services confirm that only a handful of certain varieties exist in top grades, competition intensifies, and media coverage can further amplify demand by introducing the story to audiences outside traditional coin collecting circles. And in a world where alternative investments are increasingly popular, tangible assets with compelling stories attract attention from wealthy buyers seeking diversification, and a legendary 1989 descent combining double die features, wrong planchet composition, dramatic off-center strike, repunched mint mark, die clash remnants, rotational misalignment, and pristine red surfaces could theoretically achieve a valuation in the tens of millions if two determined collectors decided it was the ultimate modern Lincoln rarity. Because auctions are driven by passion as much as by catalog values, and when prestige and bragging rights enter the equation, ceilings can shatter, and the Lincoln Cent series itself carries immense cultural weight as one of the longest-running coin designs in American history, first introduced in 1909 to honor President Abraham Lincoln, and its familiarity makes any extraordinary anomaly instantly relatable to the public, fueling the dream that treasure might be hiding in everyday change. And this psychological appeal cannot be underestimated because it keeps collectors searching rolls, examining bank-wrapped pennies, and scanning estate collections for overlooked treasures, and technological advancements such as digital microscopes and metallurgical analysis now allow experts to authenticate subtle varieties with precision, ensuring that genuine errors are distinguished from alterations or post-mint damage, and authenticity is paramount when discussing values as high as $75 million. Because only coins certified by reputable grading services with documented provenance can command such trust and attention, and provenance itself can elevate value if the coin's discovery story is dramatic, perhaps found in an original mint-sealed bag or traced back to a specific shipment from the late 1980s, creating a narrative that collectors can connect with. And stories matter deeply in numismatics because they transform metal discs into historical artifacts. And when you combine a compelling story with unmatched rarity and pristine preservation, you create the perfect conditions for a record-breaking sale. And while most 1989 D pennies will always remain worth just 1 cent, last 1982 1-cent coin. Today we are diving into one of the most dramatic and historically important years in the history of the Lincoln Cent, a year filled with transition, confusion, rare varieties, and minting mistakes that have sparked treasure hunts across the country. And that year is 1982, the year some collectors believe could produce a 1-cent coin worth an unbelievable $70 million under the right circumstances. And before you think that sounds impossible for a tiny copper-colored coin that most people toss into jars without a second thought, you need to understand why 1982 is unlike almost any other year in modern United States coinage history. Because 1982 was the year the United States Mint officially transitioned the Lincoln Cent's composition from mostly copper to copper-plated zinc, a major change driven by rising copper prices. And during that single year, multiple combinations of date styles, mint marks, and metal compositions were produced, creating a complex web of varieties that collectors still study intensely today. And when you combine this historical transition with the possibility of mint errors, dye varieties, and striking anomalies, you begin to see how a single extraordinary 1982 penny could theoretically reach staggering values if it were unique, authenticated, and preserved in near perfect condition, because in numismatics rarity is everything. And 1982 offers layers of rarity built directly into its production history, as the mint struck Lincoln cents. In both large date and small date varieties, in both copper and zinc compositions, and at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, resulting in at least 7 major collectible varieties, and among these the 1982 D small date copper cent stands out as one of the rarest and most talked about transitional errors, because officially the Denver mint was not supposed to strike small date cents on the older copper planchets. Yet a tiny number appear to exist, suggesting that leftover copper blanks were accidentally fed into presses after the small date dies had been installed, creating a transitional composition error that was never intended for circulation. And this combination of small date style and heavy 3.11 gram copper weight makes such coins extraordinarily rare and highly desirable. And now imagine taking that already rare 1982 D small date copper cent and adding additional dramatic mint errors to it, because that is where the theoretical $70 million valuation begins to enter the conversation, since collectors do not just value rarity, they value unique combinations that may never appear again. And suppose such a coin also displayed a bold double die of verse, with clear separation visible in the numbers of the date, especially the 8 and 2, along with doubling in Liberty and I in God We Trust, indicating that the die itself received multiple misaligned impressions during the hubbing process. And true doubled dies are highly collectible because the doubling is part of the die and therefore appears consistently on every coin struck from it. And if the die was discovered and removed quickly, only a very limited number of coins would show that dramatic doubling, intensifying scarcity. And now imagine that same coin was struck slightly off-center, perhaps 15% misaligned while still retaining a full readable date and mint mark, creating visual impact without losing identification, because collectors love off-center errors that clearly demonstrate the minting mistake while preserving key details. And then add yet another layer, such as a repunched mint mark where the D beneath the date was punched into the die more than once at slightly different angles, leaving faint underlying impressions visible under magnification, a feature that was becoming less common as minting technology modernized, making its appearance in a transitional year even more fascinating. And beyond die and striking errors, consider the possibility of a wrong planchet error in reverse, where instead of a copper planchet being mistakenly used during zinc production, a zinc planchet might have been struck with dies intended for copper blanks during early production runs, resulting in unusual strike characteristics, plating irregularities, or bonding issues between the copper coating and zinc core. And 1982 zinc cents are known for occasional plating bubbles and surface disruptions. But if an extreme bonding failure occurred in combination with a small date transitional die, creating a spectacular peeling effect while preserving mint state surfaces, collectors would see it as a rare intersection of composition change and mechanical imperfection, and condition plays a massive role in pushing values to extreme levels, because while circulated examples of rare varieties are valuable, a coin graded mint state 69 read by a top third-party grading service, blazing with original mint luster and virtually free of contact marks, represents condition rarity that multiplies value exponentially. And if only one such specimen were known combining copper composition, small date design, Denver mint mark, double die obverse, off-center strike, repunched mint mark, and pristine red surfaces, the coin would stand alone at the top of the Lincoln cent hierarchy for that year. And when uniqueness meets high demand in a widely collected series like the Lincoln cent, competitive bidding can push prices far beyond traditional expectations, especially in a global auction environment where wealthy collectors view rare coins as both historical artifacts and alternative investments. And the psychology behind such valuations is rooted in prestige and permanence, because owning the finest known example of the most famous transitional year in modern cent history offers not just financial potential but legacy status within the hobby. And the 1982 transition year is already legendary among collectors because it marks the end of the classic bronze era. That began in 1909 and the beginning of the copper-plated zinc era that continues today, making it a pivotal moment in American coinage history, and coins from pivotal years often carry additional emotional weight that enhances their appeal. And beyond the small-date copper variety, there is also the possibility of dramatic die clashes occurring during high-speed production, where the obverse and reverse dies struck each other without a planchet in between, leaving ghost-like impressions of Lincoln's profile on the reverse or fragments of the memorial columns on the obverse. And if such a die clash occurred on a small-date copper die and only a short run was produced before replacement, the resulting coins would show unique clash markers that specialists could identify and catalog, further narrowing the population, and die cracks and retained cuds could add even more uniqueness, as cracks spread across the die face creating raised lines on the coin, and if a chunk of the die broke but remained partially attached, forming a retained cut along the rim, the coin would display a dramatic raised area that collectors find captivating because it reveals the physical stress endured by the die. And stacking these independent minting anomalies together on a single transitional composition coin creates an almost unimaginable rarity profile, because each era type individually is scarce. But their combined occurrence on one coin would represent an extraordinary alignment of circumstances inside the minting facility, and when collectors speculate about a $70 million penny, they are imagining that perfect storm of rarity, condition, documentation, and demand. And documentation is essential because high-value coins require authentication through metallurgical analysis to confirm copper content, precise weight measurement to verify 3.11 grams rather than 2.5 grams, microscopic imaging to validate doubled die characteristics, and certification by respected grading services to ensure market confidence, and provenance could further enhance value if the coin were discovered in an original bank-wrapped roll from 1982 or traced back to a known estate collection untouched for decades, because compelling discovery stories become part of the coin's identity and contribute to its mystique. And media coverage amplifies this effect by introducing the story to audiences far beyond traditional coin collectors, inspiring treasure hunts and reinforcing the narrative that hidden wealth may lie in everyday change. And even though most 1982 pennies remain worth only face value, the existence of multiple varieties and transitional eras ensures that collectors continue searching tirelessly, weighing coins, examining date styles, and studying mint marks in hopes of finding that elusive small-date copper Denver specimen. And the dream persists because it is grounded in documented rarity, not pure fantasy, and history has shown that coins once overlooked can later become icons when new research reveals their significance, and the Lincoln Cent series has a long tradition of famous eras capturing public imagination, from doubled dies to off-metal strikes, and 1982 stands at the crossroads of tradition and modernization, making it a year uniquely positioned to produce extraordinary anomalies. And when you imagine a single 1982 cent embodying the end of the Bronze Era, the chaos of composition transition, the subtlety of small-date design,